Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this special session of Humanity Rising as we probe the very profound question that is being globally considered of what's going on in our skies. We're very pleased to be co-sponsoring this event with the New Paradigm Institute, with the Mutual UFO Network MUFON, with Paradigm Research Group, with Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, and with the Albuquerque UFO Network. This is a very seminal moment in modern history as we are collectively bearing witness to a phenomenon that, as far as we can tell, no one completely understands. We're bearing witness to objects in our skies that are acting brazenly, globally, with apparent impunity, and so far without any hostility. And government agencies and specialists on the mainstream media are at a loss to explain what they are, but keep assuring the public there's nothing really to fear, but we don't know what they are. Some people are saying that this is the largest mass sighting of unidentified anomalous phenomena in history. And so today, what we want to do here on Humanity Rising with our partners is to aggregate specialists, people who are deeply immersed in the unidentified anomalous phenomena history and field and investigation, to consider from their perspective, in the spirit of truth pursued, not truth possessed, what on earth is going on, and how should the human community understand it and respond to it. We're going to start with a series of short reports of a more technical nature to set the context, and then we're going to broaden it to a historical analysis. So we want to, and then we'll generate our discussion. We want to start with Georg Bach, who actually produced the video we just saw, who's the Director of Technology for Ubiquity University and the coordinator for our extraterrestrial studies program with the New Paradigm Institute. He's going to provide some opening remarks on the technical aspects of this phenomena. Georg?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much for everybody for joining on so short notice here. Let me put myself here on spotlight. All right, guys. So the question I'm going to ask is, what can we discern about these sightings, about this evidence that we have seen in the video, without actually having to know who's behind it, right? What's the pattern recognition that we can apply to these sightings? And I think that from what we can observe from the current footage is that there are roughly 3 types of flying objects that have been sighted at night over the US, especially in New Jersey. The first type looks kind of like a conventional military drone, right? We know it looks like human technology with a conventional propulsion. It has blinking lights. One wonders why it has these blinking lights if it's doing a covert mission. And it seems as if these military drones are searching in patterns. They're looking for something. The second type of object that we see a lot are what looks like airplanes or helicopters, but actually don't seem to be if you look closer, if you inspect it. For instance, there have been many sightings of objects that resemble a Boeing 747, but it's flying far too low and it's hardly making any noise. So there have been these theories that whatever is up there is mimicking human airplanes, a bit like they're flies that look like wasps, mimicking those, so they have less problems with predators. And thirdly, as you have seen in the video, and I wanted to underline it in the video because it seems underreported in the mainstream news, are the infamous flying plasma orbs, the bluish red energy balls that we all know so well from ufology, at least since World War II, when we had the Foo Fighters here in Germany and everywhere else on the battlefield. So these orbs move organically and rapidly, seem to ignore G-forces, and sometimes hover for very long periods like stars, which makes them even harder to track. Another thing that comes to mind if you look at all this footage on X and Twitter and TikTok is the triangle shape is very prominent. You know, these crafts fly in triangle formations. Sometimes we see kind of triangle lights and we don't know if they belong to a single craft or if they're just several crafts flying in formation. The Coast Guard has reported that these crafts lack heat signatures, so they don't show up on infrared. And many say, including the Coast Guard, that these objects originate from the ocean, as we have also seen in some of the videos there. Another thing that's very concerning is then that when reporters try to film these drones and they fly their own drones towards them, often the batteries go dead and the drones fly down. They fall down. We saw that in one of the videos in this, TikTok format, that there is a drone approaching an orb or something else, and all of a sudden it falls down. So whatever is making this statement in the skies wants to be noticed. Right? It wants to be seen. It seems like we're in a state of madness, of mutually assured disinformation, where the secrecy seems at this point indistinguishable from incompetence, if you ask me. And from my European perspective, I'm here in Berlin, Germany, it's in the mainstream really difficult to comprehend why the US, after weeks of these incursions, thinks it's still viable to stay silent on what's happening on primetime news worldwide. I've seen it from India, I've seen it from Italy, from Mexico. It's really damaging the US defense brand as such. The secrecy they're trying to protect must be of immense proportions if they're willing to look this incompetent over it. So for me, the central question remains, if there are unidentified drones hovering over the sensitive US military airspace, like reported in the last weeks, why are they not being shut down? And with that, let's go back to Jim and start the discussion. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Georg, very much. We're going to now turn to Robert Spearing, who's the Director of International Investigations for MUFON. And MUFON has been tracking these matters for over 60 years. So Robert, tell us from your perspective, what on earth is going on?
First of all, thank you, Jim, for having me. I appreciate it. You, Danny Sheehan, from Paradigm, all your partners, including Dave McDonald and Ron James from MUFON. What we've seen in the MUFON database over the past month compared to last year is that we have a 32% increase in the amount of sightings, UFO sightings we're getting. In New Jersey, it's an astonishing 88% increase over last year. The problem with New Jersey right now is that there's two competing narratives as to what's going on. One is that this is simply some sort of contracted drone activity out of Picatinny, and that's why they've closed down the airspace below 2,000 feet in that area. And the other competing narrative is that possibly there may be something radiological on the ground, a nuke, material for a dirty bomb, and that these may be nest drones, nuclear emergency support team drones. But neither of these explanations are thoroughly adequate to explain what's going on. As far as the orbs go, when an orb, and these orbs have tails, it's suggestive that there may be an actual solid object enveloped in a plasma, because plasma will absorb radar signals. So we don't know what's really going on in New Jersey or worldwide, but I will tell you this, that last night, the Secret Service told President-elect Donald Trump not to go to his Bedminster property in New Jersey. And also this morning, the FAA has implemented massive areas of no-fly zones for drones over New Jersey. We're seeing either incompetence, like Jorg said, or we're seeing something far more sinister. This is why I always tell people it's imperative to, when you see something in the sky, report it to MUFON, a free and grassroots organization. If you send your UFO reports or your UAP reports into private corporations' databases or into the government's, it only slows down disclosure, and those entities are under no compunction to ever tell the public what's really going on. MUFON gives our reports, statistics to Congress every once in a while. Our database is available to the general public, all 140,000 cases, and we are free and open, as are our partners here today. So I encourage people, if you see something in the sky, especially now at this critical juncture, please report it to MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. And with that, I just want to again thank everybody, and I'm done. I appreciate it.
Quick question, Robert. Was there any explanation by the authorities for the warning to President-elect Trump or the declaration of no-fly zones over parts of New Jersey? What did they say was the reason?
It was just a very short news article this morning. It broke at 9:46 that the FAA is shutting down large areas of airspace in New Jersey. And last night on WABC News Radio, they broke that the Secret Service was telling Donald Trump not to go to his Bedminster residence. So if it is our drones in the sky, why would we be doing no-fly zones? Why would we tell the president-elect not to go to his New Jersey residence? It's pretty scary.
Absolutely. Well, this is a perfect segue to Kevin Wright, the press officer of the New Paradigm Institute, who lives in Washington and has been tracking these matters. Georg said that this is a conflation of secrecy and incompetence. Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, following up from what Robert was just saying, is an either or of incompetence or disinformation, but I don't think they're actually mutually exclusive. You can have both of those things occurring at the same time. As for what's going on in DC, you likely already know that there has been a briefing in the last 48 or so hours by several three-letter agencies of the executive branch to brief members of Congress that lasted approximately 2 hours. I think members of Congress left that briefing rather bewildered by the lack of transparency and the lack of information coming forth or forward from the White House and the Department of Defense, the CIA, Department of Homeland Security, and others. The opaqueness and lack of clarity is clearly leaving members of Congress to posit their own theories about what's going on, from foreign adversaries like China to a non-nation state hostile intelligence actor of some sort, to something maybe potentially far more exotic, like a non-human intelligence. On the legislative front, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer put forward a bill that would provide more state and local drone interdiction capabilities, but that was thwarted on the Senate floor by an objection by Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky. And of course, we have the National Defense Authorization Act, which has passed now the House and the Senate. It's on its way to the president's desk for his signature. It, of course, does not include the UAP Disclosure Act. And so all of this and all these developments are really just sort of leading us here to this conversation today, I think, which is for, you know, a diversity of viewpoints and thoughts from different experts in the field to have their own sort of theories and discuss them here as to what's going on.
A quick question, Kevin, before we move on to Robert's report about the president-elect Donald Trump being told not to go to his golf resort in New Jersey. Have you heard anything about that? Is there any additional information you could provide?
Not anything, you know, above and beyond what Robert was reporting. I don't think there's any new or fresh information, you know, coming up on that. I'm sure that we'll see that more, you know, as people start reporting on that today, though.
Yeah, well, if you hear anything before this session ends, let me know and we'll bring it back on. You too, Robert, because we're in a situation of breaking news that can break at any moment. So thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you.
So now, everyone, we want to turn to a historical framing by the preeminent historian of these matters, Richard Dolan. You've all, I'm sure, read his book, 2-volume books on UFOs and the national security state. He's just coming up with a 3-volume work on USOs, unidentified submerged objects. Richard, how do you understand what's happening now within the historical context as you understand it?
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me here, and very much appreciated the contributions from the folks who have already been speaking on this, Georg, Robert, and Kevin. Yeah, well, there are a couple of things about what we're dealing with now with this, let's call them the mystery drones, for lack of a better term, compared with the past. So if we want to look at past incidents of, let's just say, UFO sightings over sensitive U.S. bases and locations, and also just in general UFO flaps or waves, that is mass sightings that take place in concentrated areas over brief periods of time in the past. There are certain points of comparison and differences, what we're seeing now. But just to remind people, if they're not aware, there were sightings over Los Alamos and Oak Ridge nuclear facilities back in the late 1940s that went on for quite some time. They were not widely publicized at the time, but they were definitely happening, unknown objects. During the summer of 1947, of course, there was a very widespread wave of public sightings across the United States, which did get a lot of attention. But during that summer, there was also multiple sightings at places like Muroc Army Airfield. That became Edwards Air Force Base in California. 1949, we know of UFO sightings over some kind of key atomic base, probably New Mexico. There was a wave of sightings happening in 1949, 1950 in that whole area. There were sightings over the Hanford nuclear facility in the state of Washington in 1950. This is a long, long history. In 1952, many people are aware, we had a very significant wave of sightings across the United States. Got a lot of media attention, as 1947 did, as this mystery drone sighting is currently. So there's a couple of precedents for what we are experiencing now. But there were others as well. 1957, there was a wave of sightings, not quite the same level of publicity. 1965, 66 in the United States. Back in 1954 in Europe, there was a wave of sightings, landings of alleged landings, and even sightings of beings throughout much of Europe during that period of time. Again, continuing through the late 60s, there were more UFO incidents over places like Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, which we know a lot about these now. At the time, they did not receive a huge amount of publicity, but they did subsequently. In 1975, in the United States, there was a series of very, very powerful UFO sightings over military bases in the northern US and Canada. Did not get a lot of media attention until a few years later. But again, the pattern is these unknown objects hovering and snooping, we could say, over very sensitive places. And we know about the Rendlesham case in December 1980 over RAF Woodbridge. And then throughout 1989, 1990, you had sightings over northwestern Europe, Belgium, most prominently. Also, the old Soviet Union received some media attention, some kind of snoopery and clandestine activity perhaps occurring. We've never gotten an explanation for these. And then in the 21st century, retrospectively, we learned about the Nimitz encounter and the Roosevelt encounter from 2015. But also there was at least some media attention to the Chicago O'Hare encounter of 2006. And then let's not forget the Stephenville, Texas sighting of 2008. Those were not waves of sightings, but they did get media attention at that time. So we have a series of incidents that have some similarity to what we're experiencing now and differences. One thing about today that I think is different is we're not really, at least I'm not seeing, MUFON is probably getting this, but specific sightings that are reported from start to finish. When you read the media accounts of these, my take is that there's a lot of vagaries. There's not a lot of specificity. For example, we had the claim from the New Jersey Congressman Chris Smith, who, and I'm not doubting what he says, by the way, but the allegation of 50 or so objects either emerging from the ocean or coming in from the ocean to the shore. That's very, very interesting, very important. But what are the specifics? Where exactly did this happen? What is the exact date? And similarly, the allegation about U.S. Coast Guard being followed by anywhere from 12 to up to 30 of these mystery drones, UAP. What are they? When was the exact date, location, so forth? So MUFON's getting this information, I'm sure, and that's very important. But we're really not getting, in the public, it seems to me, a lot of data that would allow us to do a proper, real investigation of what is happening. I think that's critically important. One other thing I'll just mention here, when I look over these past waves of sightings or these past sensitive incidents over U.S. military bases or other military bases, doesn't have to be U.S. One thing I've never really got as a proven determination is that any of them were provably caused by clandestine military activity. I'm not saying that has never happened, but I have just never seen an analysis that said like the wave of sightings over bases in 1947 or 1950 or 1952 or the 1960s or the 1970s, that these were actually triggered or caused by clandestine military operations. We have all sorts of claims throughout history that this was the case. 25 years ago, the CIA historian Gerald K. Haynes wrote a paper that alleged many of these sightings were caused by military tests like the U-2 spy plane. But in fact, if you really get into the details, he never offered any viable, particular, specific sighting that the U-2 caused. These are claims that you hear, but they're just tossed out very casually. When you get into the real details of these past waves of sightings, it is not clear, to me at least, that any of them were caused by military technology. So it's just worth keeping in mind. The sightings of the past are genuine unknowns in the sense that we have not been able to attribute them to anything conventional. 1960s is a good example. There were lots and lots of very well-publicized sightings over the United States that we just have not explained. 1967, by the way, there's a lot of sightings in many other parts of the world, South America, and similarly, we don't really have good experimental technology explanations for, in my opinion, for really any of them that would explain them. So I was really glad that that Georg put together that video to start us off here, because some of those images we could say, yeah, that looks like a drone or some kind of conventional aircraft. Absolutely, there is definitely a number of those. But there are some of these others. I've noticed a lot of the orb video as well, and that's a little bit harder for me to just say, oh yeah, definitely experimental technology. Doesn't necessarily lead me to that conclusion. I've also heard of accounts of people who said their battery drained very rapidly upon trying to record these, and that of course is classic UFO behavior going back decades and decades. So there are some really interesting things here. Last thing I'll just say before I give up the floor is you've got a lot of kind of mainstream-ish commentators who are very engaged in this, and I'm seeing not a whole lot of credence given to genuine UAP or, let's say, NHI, non-human intelligence behind it. And I can understand that, because I'm sure that most of those people do not know the long history of this type of activity. I'm sure they're not aware of it because it's just not really widely taught or understood. But the fact is that there are definite strange things here that are not easy to explain, and to dismiss them all as some kind of clandestine activity, I think, is grossly premature. The explanation of that was just offered by Mr. Ferguson, I believe his name was, that these are possibly, potentially drones that are sniffing, as he put it, nuclear ordnance. I can understand wanting to go there, but I'm very skeptical of that. And the reason is a couple of reasons. One is, how would that explain the sightings over the UK bases that we were talking about a month ago, or the very wide geography of even the northeastern US drone sightings, mystery drone sightings? They're not just New Jersey. They're down as far as Virginia, apparently, and as up north as Massachusetts, out into Pennsylvania. If they are looking for nuclear or radioactive material over that wide a range, that tells me they have no idea. Like, they are really flailing away here in a manner that should actually concern all of us, if they really have not the slightest clue of where this allegedly radioactive material is. Is it in the UK? Is it in Jersey? Is it in Virginia? Is it up in Cape Cod or somewhere else? That would be concerning. So there are definite things here that should lead us to withhold a judgment that these are definitely all actually drones. That's the assumption that a lot of media people are saying, but those of us who've studied this phenomenon for any length of time, I think we know a little bit better that it's not necessarily all conventionally explained. Some of these clearly seem to be. There's definitely a certain amount of misidentification of conventional craft. Yes, even astronomical sightings, no question. And that just makes it like every other UFO wave. I mean, you're always going to get a lot of noise mixed in with the signal. And I don't think we should be too worried about excessive amounts of noise. I think we need to be focusing on what's the real strange stuff going on here. And for that, we need specific sightings data. Thank goodness MUFON is getting these reports. I looked over at the National UFO Reporting Center, which is open to anyone to see, and there's not as much of a clear signal in that, in my view, when I'm looking at those cases. There's some very good sightings from around the world, and I ask myself, are these related to the so-called mystery drones? Or are they totally different? And it's really hard to know. There's sightings coming in from everywhere, every day, because that's the nature of the UFO, UAP phenomenon. You get them from around the world every day. And finding patterns in that is not always, for at least me, not always the easiest thing to do. Because, you have to ask, like, which ones are totally legit, which ones fit a certain pattern of behavior, and so on. And there's a lot of material to go through. So with that, I'll just leave it there, and we can follow up anytime.
Thank you, Richard. Just quick question. I just want to make sure I understood that you were stating that, in your view, there's no verifiable evidence, not only in the current situation, but historically, for military-related drone activity in this space.
That's,
That-
yeah, I think
That's
that's
what you're
right.
saying, right?
That would be sufficient enough to cause a, let's say, a significant wave of sightings. That is my
Gotcha.
opinion. I'm not saying that on limited bases it hasn't happened. Sure, no question. I'm sure that's the case. But to cause a significant amount of a lot of witnesses with a lot of public attention, no, I'm not seeing that at all. There was always this suspicion. Back in 1947, this was a suspicion that a lot of people held. You know, Kenneth Arnold, when he saw the so-called flying saucers, wondered himself, was this some kind of test of new technology? But when you look back over it, where is the evidence that the 1947 wave was a test of new technology? I'm not aware of any genuine evidence that this is the case. People can make claims, but it just doesn't look like. There's certainly been no admission in subsequent years, and that goes for the 1950s as well, and that goes for the 1960s. You get specific claims. I heard a claim once that the Lonnie Zamora sighting in Socorro, New Mexico, 1964, was the test of a kind of a proto-Apollo craft. Well, people can make any kind of claim they want, but there is no evidence that that's genuinely the answer, and I don't think it was, frankly. So no, I don't think that we can really say confidently that we know of any wave of UFO sightings caused by the United States military.
Thank you. Well, stick around because I think that's going to re-enter the conversation when we get into the larger discussion. But thank you, Richard. Thank you very much for your erudition and the vast scope of your knowledge about this very mysterious domain. So thank you.
Thanks.
We want to broaden everyone the conversation now, having set the context technically and politically and historically as best we could in a few minutes, knowing that this is a vast and almost unlimited domain of human inquiry that at its essence, then and now, is a great mystery. That's why we chose 2001: A Space Odyssey as the music at the opening video. We're now dealing with cosmic matters as human beings around contact with a mystery that so far we do not even understand enough to quantify or qualify for ourselves. And yet the phenomenon continues to impress itself on us. It's an extraordinary moment to be alive. So we want to commence our conversation now, and we've just gathered together a number of people that I'll tee up, but we're going to start with Danny Sheehan, who's the president and general counsel of the New Paradigm Institute, who's been involved with UFO, UAP matters since the 1970s. And the point of this discussion is to have each one of the speakers now really state in their own way what they think is going on. So Danny, welcome.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. There we go. Great. So let me spend 5 or 6 minutes here addressing, I think, 8 different specific points to just kind of put a fine point on this contexting of what it is that we're talking about here today. I want to first reiterate something that Richard has said, you know, that the information is still flowing in here. You know, that we're in the midst of gathering information about this particular phenomenon. So it's still too early to really come to any kind of responsible assertion as to exactly what is happening here or who is responsible for it. That's my first point. Secondly, it's clear to me, at least, based upon my knowledge about this, this began basically in 1977, that it's clear that somewhere inside the full capacities of our United States government and our intelligence gathering agencies, the investigative agencies, and the technological data collecting technologies that we have deployed in the United States, that someone some agency of our United States government presently has a very clear understanding of what it is that's going on here, and who is primarily, at least, responsible for the kind of initiating events that are being responded to by others. But our government is not telling us, as the citizens, what this is. Our executive branch is concealing the information that they obviously have about this, and the legislative branch is typically not informed by the executive branch, which is a very serious problem that we've been addressing at the New Paradigm Institute. This major constitutional problem of the executive branch believing that it has the right to conceal information from our elected representatives. So that's the second point that I would like to make, is that somebody knows about what this is, and they're intentionally not telling us. Thirdly, I want to point out again, for the larger context, that we as a country, and even as a planet right now, here on December 19th of 2024, we are presently in the midst of a distinctly fraught period. There's half a dozen major things that are going on right now that lend to the atmosphere within which this series of events are taking place. Number one, we've just finished a very disruptive electoral campaign, having chosen a new president to take the place of the pending president at the present time. The United States Senate has just changed control of the Senate from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. The House election that has just taken place is now the closest, most razor-thin majority of the Republican Party that in ages. And this has generated a very high level of anxiety on the part of people on both sides of the recent elections, in that the government of France has just fallen. The government of the UK has recently fallen, and there are upcoming new elections in this. The collapse of the Assad regime in the Middle East has gotten everybody very upset about what's going on. Secondly, as we know, in addition to this fraught period caused by this recent election, in the pending incoming administration, with almost half of the nominees for the heads of our 15 major cabinet level positions in the 8 major agencies, at least half of these are being substantially challenged by members of both parties in the United States Senate, indicating that many of those will not be approved. And therefore, the government is not really stable at the present time to be able to function. So the second major theme, of course, is that there's this massive land war going on in Eastern Europe, in the Ukraine, with a Russian invasion, in the pending threat of major global potential thermonuclear war. Right now, the famous doomsday clock of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists has been reset now to 90 seconds before midnight. And the most recent crisis of this kind of scope of the threat of nuclear war was back during the Cuban Missile Crisis back in October of 1962. And at that time, the doomsday clock was set at 7 minutes before midnight. We are now at 90 seconds before midnight, with the pending threat of a thermonuclear exchange between Russia and the NATO countries and the United States. That's a terribly fraught situation, putting people into a high state of anxiety. Thirdly, there's a massive slaughter still going on in the Middle East, triggered by the October 7th, 2023, just 1 year ago, basically, attack by Hamas into Israel, killing 1,200 people in this horrible event. And it's been responded to now, as we know, by the state of Israel under the regime of Benjamin Netanyahu in this extremely reactionary nationalist Likud-led sort of government in slaughtering some 45,000 civilians, almost half of whom are children, going on right now. And this has generated a huge disequilibrium in Western civilization, most nation states of which are generally supportive of Israel, but are now terribly confused about how to go about responding to what the state of Israel is doing. So in addition to these, there's a third and very important issue going on. Our fourth one is the onset of the upcoming massive consequences of global climate change that we see going on around us. You know, huge swaths of the country and the world are being inundated by tornadoes and hurricanes and rising sea levels. You know, whether one thinks this is being driven by the increased projection of carbon into our atmosphere by the petroleum industry or some other natural cause, the reality of this coming on is extraordinarily upsetting for most people. And fifthly, our human family, very importantly, and it's important for this particular conversation that we're having, our human family is right on the verge of being informed that we are being and have been being for decades at least visited by members of an extraterrestrial civilization, non-human civilization indeed, possibly extra-dimensional in some of its manifestations. This is, you know, the incoming president, Donald Trump, has promised repeatedly during his campaign that he is going to virtually immediately after his inauguration on January 20th, you know, less than a month away, or one day more than a month away, is going to announce to the world that we're being visited by an extraterrestrial civilization that is perhaps billions of years advanced to us, with massive new technology that may be totally disruptive of our present technological civilization, you know, theologically more advanced than we are, et cetera. This is potentially disruptive of the major geopolitical structures on our planet, our economic structures. And the fact is that we've been being lied to about this. You know, and our Congress has been being lied to about this. And there are elements inside our military and intelligence communities that have known this for decades and have been apparently trying to back engineer the technology from these UFOs to make a new weapons system. You know, that all of these things are contributing to an extraordinarily fraught situation right now within which this flap is taking place. Now, in such a fraught period, general populations are in any given human community are very inclined during a period of instability like this to misperceive things that are going on and to misinterpret them, to be adding to their potential confusion. And so that's a fourth item I want to point out. Indeed, we see people reading into limited data that we're getting right now, each individual's own kind of pre-existing worldviews that are being projected upon what it is that's really happening there. But I would like to say, for example, we see certain individuals now doing this. Preeminently, Dr. Stephen Greer, you know, a long time ardent and important participant in trying to analyze the UFO phenomenon, having put forth a very clear and sort of internally self-referentially consistent theory of what it is that's going on right now, asserting that this is the prelude to his long predicted false flag operation, that the element deeply buried within the National Executive Intelligence Committee communities, rather, in military, are in fact planning to fake an invasion by a UFO extraterrestrial civilization in order to solidify their power and control. over the military and executive branch because they don't trust Donald Trump. They don't think that he is going to be continuing to pursue their military intelligence objectives. That Dr. Greer has been very clear about this. He's asserting that he is in the process with a group of people from deep inside this project, which is codenamed the Immaculate Constellation, that he's getting ready to reveal to the world between now and the inauguration a month from now. The full panoply of what the information is about the UFOs. And Lou Elizondo, one of the more additionally prominent persons in this dialogue going on, has set forth a whole range of possibilities of what this might be. But one of them he has at least allowed himself to hint at is saying, not that he's supporting this, but saying that this could be actually, surveillance operations on the part of a extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional non-human civilization coming in to surveil all of our major nuclear facilities and sensitive facilities. That this, and just if you put that on a list of things that a person of the stature of Lou Elizondo has hypothesized as might be possible, that feeds right into Stephen Greer's assertion that Lou and others, Chris Mellon and even Carl Nell and David Grush and others are all part of some deep conspiracy that's trying to fake, an alien invasion. Now, this dialectic going on, in a sense, between these two portions of our community, is typical of individuals who are projecting onto a set of data that isn't quite clarified yet as to what's going on here, their potential positions on these things. And even though Lou is just setting forth a set of alternative possibilities here, others are seizing upon some of one or another of these is what he's asserting, which he hasn't really done yet. So this is a classic projection onto a mysterious situation of things. Now, the fact is, I want to say one more thing before I sort of set forth at the beginning of our conversation what I might think this is. It's important in the various investigations that I've run over the last 50 years, that people have heard about. It's usually the case that more than one thing is going on that generates a mysterious response like this, in that they're being conflated one with another. And therefore, until you weed out what the alternative things are that are all coming together, like 3 or 4 vehicles coming together in a given intersection, and they're all making one kind of a mistake or another that causes a major collision in the intersection. There are a number of things that are probably going on right here, virtually certainly are, that are confusing everyone to be able to come to some kind of single narrative of what's going on. What I would like to say in closing in my few minutes here is I believe that what we are seeing happening, it's a little bit different than Richard so far has suggested, is that I believe that there's significant indications that what we're experiencing here is a major top secret military readiness exercise. That we've encountered these in the past, and people have, for example, have seen trains, 2-mile long trains with flatbeds with American tanks being moved around inside the country, major jet activity that they couldn't understand, which are all part of secret military readiness exercises. That I believe that that there is I suspect that there's a major military readiness exercise that's underway right now. I believe it's based out of Fort Dix in New Jersey. I believe that what they're doing is they're running a major exercise, experimenting with a drone system that they have of being able to potentially detect a lost nuke or a dirty bomb, a nuclear bomb somewhere that's loose inside the United States, that they may be engaged in a major military readiness exercise using a new technology that they have in military drones that are able to actually hover for as long as 6 hours, unlike other types of more commercially available drones. I believe it's operating basically out of Fort Dix in New Jersey. That's why you have the density of it there. And what's happening is that they're undertaking a hypothetical war game scenario as if there were a dirty bomb loose here in North America somewhere, and they're doing a readiness exercise to try to find it, or that there is some other thing going on. That there may be theoretically some renegade a group that's gotten a hold of some of these types of drones, and that what they're doing is potentially threatening the life of the president. Planning to try to potentially assassinate the president. These are war game scenarios that the executive branch has historically set forth on the basis of which they conduct these readiness exercises. And people get pieces of this information from, quote, reliable sources that they have inside the intelligence community. And what they're doing is they're picking up on what the false scenario is, pursuant to which the readiness exercise is being conducted, and they believe these are true. And you may even get one branch of the government, such as the Secret Service or others, who have not been briefed in on the readiness exercise, picking up on this rumor going around that there's a drone attack being planned against the president or the president-elect. So that these things are causing people a great deal of confusion. But I believe that if pushed to have to hypothesize what I think the high probabilities are here, is that what we're experiencing is a major military readiness exercise that has not been revealed to Congress or to the other investigative agencies of the country, and that it's operating out of Fort Dix. There are other bases from which it's operating, Fort Huachuca in Arizona, and then Fort Bliss down in Texas, and one additional base, the United States Air Force Base, the Cheech Air Force Base outside of Las Vegas. I'm going to introduce now Dick Russell, who has been honing in on this particular theory because I find it in part persuasive, if not yet convincing. But I think it's important for us to take into account all of these half dozen things that are all going on at the present time that lend to this confusion that's happening. But the base one that we have to deal with is the fact that we are on the very brink of getting a substantial amount of information, hopefully, about the UFO phenomenon that's been concealed for over 80 years. And we at the New Paradigm Institute, who are allied with most of the people that are here in this conversation today, are pressing for Donald Trump to come forward and, as the president-elect, reveal to the people what it is that is known by our government about the UFO phenomenon. That's the critical thing. We need to take action as American citizens now, not just be confused and bewildered in the face of all this, but to take action, to demand that our executive branch brief our Congress on what's happening, and also to brief the American people. So that's my contribution to the setting of the frame for the conversation that we're going to have here this morning.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you very much. And now let's turn to Dick Russell to hear what you believe. Dick is an investigative journalist.
Thanks very much, Jim. Good to be with you today. And Danny, thanks for that overview. So yes, I'm an investigative journalist. I've written 16 nonfiction books on a wide variety of subjects. And the latest one that I've been working on is a book subject that's fascinated me for years, which is the UFO or UAP phenomenon. And I recently started a Substack newsletter called Blowing the Whistle, which has enabled me to get into the drone situation. And I've been receiving some really interesting information from different people that I want to share with you all today. Of course, some of these are as big as SUVs, some of these drones that have been sighted. And, their propulsion is amazing. A lot of them come out of the ocean, as we've seen. And one thing that came up on a number of times is that the evidence that this is actually a situation of a military training type exercise or something similar, is that the navigation lights on these objects correspond with the requirements of the Federal Aviation Administration. You know, that they don't want to run into any other craft, and they're in compliance with nighttime flying rules, which indicates, you know, there's some knowledge that by the government that this is what's going on. But we don't know what they are. And as one intelligence veteran told me, Frank Camper, who was 20 some years with the CIA, he said, you know, one helicopter would photo identify these drones. And so, you know, it's the same song and dance we were getting about these balloons for a long time that finally they said came from China back in 2023. But he says, you know, the fact that they say they can't find the drones or capture them or take one down is just BS, because there are hundreds of systems that could do that and make them crash or get captured if they wanted to. So the first thing that got me really intrigued about the possibility of a military operation was an email or post from someone who called himself Radar Guy. And he said there's something big about to go down. This is a military drill by Space Force. Now, Space Force, for any of you who don't know about it, was established in 2019, and it was the newest arm of our part of our armed services. And one of the quotes that on their website particularly struck me, which says, potential adversaries are seeking ways to deny the United States access to the space capabilities fundamental to our way of war and modern way of life. So what Radar Guy says is happening is that there's this off the books satellite launches that have been occurring since October, that there's going to be this period of turning over all the radio and radar and aircraft communications to the military for several hours at a time between now and Christmas Eve. And Frank Camper also, he's not the one who told me that, but Radar Guy indicated this. And then Camper said, you know, the military, he believes, is practicing anti-drone countermeasures. And I received some verification about a training program at Fort Dix, where they had this drone convoy that dropped tennis balls into the hatches of Humvees as fake bombs. He also told me that there are like more than 40 ranges there. And so I also saw online, before I get into the most significant thing that I think has reached my plate anyway, Colonel William Dunn who's the president of the Strategic Resilience Group. He said, I think, to Fox News that these are coming from inside the US, and as Danny and others have pointed out today, they're looking for something, either a chemical or a biological weapon or maybe radiation. Okay, and now the key guy that I have been speaking with and has been emailing me is in military intelligence. Now, I'm not going to name him. He didn't want to go public with this yet, but he's been working in the drone program at Fort Huachaca in Arizona for the past 4 years. And he named several bases, which Danny also mentioned, as likely origins of these aircraft. And he says that this is a training program it's under counterterrorism, and it's also to control various facilities like power stations, grids, and waterworks, or know how to do that. And that they have radiation detector devices on these drones looking for leakage, and watching truck transport. So something is missing, he said, and they're trying to find it. And I'm going to read you, I published in my latest, I've done 3 of these posts now on blowing the whistle. And in the most recent one yesterday, I quoted him, and I call him a whistleblower. And he sent me this email, which is in line with also what Danny has been talking about. He says, I'm reluctant to say this in the public domain because of the sensitivity of the information circulating around military intelligence and other MI operations via Pentagon sources. Yes, they are looking for drones with a unique signature that could possibly penetrate established security defenses and secured radio frequencies. A rogue military group actively operating has access to 16 commercial-grade drones modified to carry weapons. 2 of these drones have been found and taken out of service. 3 of the military operatives have been arrested, and as a result, military intelligence received information from them about a mission that MI turned over via Pentagon sources to the Secret Service. The Secret Service is now actively gathering information on how to detect and jam radio frequencies that control these drone operations. They're concerned because of credible recent intel reports received that a drone attack is currently in the works to attempt a hit on President-elect Trump at a future gathering before or shortly after January 20th. Now, at the same time that this is going on, according to my source, Congress is about to reauthorize a bill that was passed in 2018. It's going to expire on December 20th. And the chairman of the House subcommittee on this subject wants to renew and expand it. Right now, it's illegal to use military-grade drones for data collection and surveillance, but this could change if the bill passes and enhances the powers of the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department. So I think that's something we need to be very concerned about because, again, we're talking about threats to civil liberties in this country, which have been undermined considerably in recent years. And I think that playing into this, I would concur with Danny that there's a possible psychological operation, a psyop going on to create fear in the populace. And that in fact, some of what we may be seeing are craft that have been in fact reverse engineered and weaponized by our own government so that they have the capability to move as a lot of the UAPs do that they've recovered. And I'm sure most of you are aware that there have been congressional hearings where military guys have come forward, particularly Dave Grush last year, saying that yes, we've captured these UAPs as they're called, and we have even found recovered bodies, and they've been back engineered by our military. So that's something I think we definitely need to be aware of, as well as the fact that there is, according to Dr. Greer and others, likely to be a major document release over the next few weeks even. And that some of what we're seeing may be, in a sense, preparation or what you might call a false flag in that sense. So I'll close with that. I'm going to keep looking into this for my Substack, and I thank you for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Dick. Before we expand the conversation, I just want to make sure that I'm clear about one thing that you said in reference to Donald Trump and the possibility that there may be some kind of a drone attack on the president-elect. Is this your understanding that it is a drill, or is it something that's real?
It could be a drill in preparation for something like that. I honestly don't know. All I can do is, report what I'm getting from these different sources. And
that's a very serious assertion.
It's a very serious assertion. Yeah, I hope it's not true, but this is what I'm being told by somebody who's in the know. So I felt it was an obligation I have to at least report it. I don't come down on one side or the other. I mean, I wish these were alien craft that are coming to greet us, but it may be a whole other thing. And so I think it's incumbent upon me as a journalist to put this out and put it out for discussion among our group today and other people.
Well, thank you very much. We'll circle back later in the program for your comment.
Thank you.
So let me summarize a moment, everyone, because I think we've come to a very important juncture here. We've just heard very explicitly from Danny Sheehan and Dick Russell their view that this is ultimately military in nature and is something that the U.S. government, in various dark recesses of the bureaucracy and the military-industrial complex, are orchestrating, possibly out of Space Force, to both experiment in technology sophistication, but also protection. And there are also some indications, if you broaden that to what Dr. Stephen Greer is saying, that this is a psyop that's being orchestrated by individuals in the deep state for the purposes, as Dr. Greer asserts it, for disclosure, for a larger disclosure. And we may be seeing something like that in the immediate, imminent future. So that's one set of possibilities. They're very real and very concrete, I would say. So now we want to go to the opposite end of the interpretive framework, to a couple people who are experiencing what is currently taking place, not within the context of the US military intelligence community, but within the context of intuitive remote viewing, with the understanding that these are, in fact, unidentified anomalous phenomena, and therefore the phenomenon is extraterrestrial in nature. So I first want to go to Bertie Jaworski, who is the founder of the Albuquerque UFO Network, one of the most extraordinary, dynamic groups of UFO citizen activists anywhere in the country and, in fact, the world. She's also a very accomplished remote viewer. She's been sending out various YouTubes of her remote viewing, which, as you all know, since the 1970s, the CIA and other government agencies have used remote viewing as perhaps the most accurate way of discerning what's really happening with these unidentified anomalous phenomena. So, Bertie, I want to turn the floor over to you to get your understanding of what's going on, and then we're going to hear from Chris Bledsoe afterward, who's also deeply intuitive about these matters. So, Bertie, what's your sense about what's going on?
Yeah, thanks, Jim, for having me on the program. So I remote viewed this a couple weeks ago, and I uploaded 3 sessions that I did. And in remote viewing, you generally work blind, meaning you don't know what it is that you're looking at. And someone gives you a task to do, and they reveal it to you at the end. So what I got in looking at the New Jersey drone situation was really interesting. It doesn't necessarily rule out what Danny was just talking about, because I absolutely got a military presence in the sky over New Jersey. I got what I described to be helicopters and military type drones, very high tech, very sophisticated, that were doing something in the sky, some kind of maneuvers. But I also got quite a number of anomalous objects. These objects could morph and shift. They could shift into all kinds of similar looking to US aircraft, such as airplanes or drones, but maybe a little bit off. And I also had a sense that whatever this non-human intelligence is that's interacting up there in the sky and was interacting with these military personnel, that this non-human intelligence was extraordinarily concerned about our human trajectory at this point in time. It was looking at us from a unique perspective that's hard to describe. In remote viewing, you can understand what something is thinking or what kind of message that it may have to impart. And one of the pieces of information that I got in this session in describing what was happening around me was that this intelligence viewed us human beings, us as humanity, as simply a part of this planet, that we were connected to this planet. We have deep roots. We are the roots of this planet. And we are no different than any other life form on this planet to them. We are all part of some big, huge whole that has its own sense of consciousness, and they were concerned about what was going to happen with all this. I also got that some of these military pilots, and one in particular, a helicopter operator, had received a message from this non-human intelligence that was extremely distressing to him. He was also receiving information about what he should be doing from his higher ups, and they were giving him his instructions. They were also asking for him to try to disengage whatever these objects were, to try to not shoot them out of the sky, but try to disengage them. But whatever he didn't work. So what I'm getting in the remote viewing is a sense that there's a lot of stuff up in the sky right now. It's complicated, but there absolutely is a non-human intelligence. It's replicating. It is coming out of the water. It replicates within the water, comes back out. It's cataloging information. It's collecting information, going back into the water, getting new orders or ideas, coming back out of the water, more of them, and that we're seeing this spreading, and we're going to continue to see more and more of these objects as time goes by. The other thing that was interesting in my session was the idea that whatever is happening is cyclical, that this has happened in the past, in other locations around the planet, that what we're seeing today isn't unique. We have seen this before. So, Jim, that is what I have been getting.
Thank you. And just a quick question, given what Danny Sheehan and Dick Russell just said, which is quite an extraordinary assertion. What did you see, Bertie, in terms of, is there a relationship between the non-human intelligences and what's going on? Are they countering it in some way? Was this a kind of complete fluke that they both appeared for different reasons at the same time? What's your sense of any kind of synergy or relationship between what's happening, given the fact that you're asserting that they're both happening simultaneously?
Yes, they're both happening at the same time. But what's interesting to me is that there's more of a relationship coming from the non-human intelligence toward us, towards the military presence, than there is from the military presence going to the non-human intelligence.
Right.
The non-human intelligence seems to be extraordinarily concerned about what's happening. I could not decipher all of the information that I was getting in remote viewing, especially looking at a non-human intelligence. It's easy to anthropomorphize it and to put your own human interpretation on it. And I always try not to do that, but it's difficult. And so I couldn't exactly decode what was going on with them in their consciousness. I don't want to say what they're thinking, because it didn't seem to work like it does with us. But they had this deep concern about what's happening with us, at the sense that we are at this precipice or a crossroads, that we are making bad decisions, that we have a broken connection to this planet. That kept coming up over and over again in the sessions, was that we have a broken connection, and that they're extraordinarily concerned about that broken connection.
Well, thank you. And of course, this is consistent with what we know from the last 80 years, is that they've appeared over nuclear weapons facilities, they've appeared over military bases, they've appeared when there's some kind of a danger of a nuclear exchange, as Danny Sheehan was pointing out earlier. So the fact that the US military could be orchestrating this could possibly trigger the presence that you're discerning. Would that be consistent with what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They were there because of us, because of their concern. That was very clear, that that was the reason they were there. This wasn't simply a sightseeing mission or any kind of normal mission for whatever this intelligence is. They're here because they are extraordinarily concerned about what's going on with humanity right now.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you
Jim.
so much. There's a lot to ponder when the human and the cosmic interweave in such a publicly compelling way.
Yes.
You know, this is biblical, everybody, because if you read your Bible or the Quran or any of the religious books, at times of great historical moment, stars align, planets align, the cosmos and the heavens and the earth come together in what the Greeks would call the kairos moment, where the whole is more than the sum of the parts, and something indelibly fateful occurs. So thank you, Bertie, very much for that. And
Thank
we
you,
want
Jim.
to build on Bertie's intuitive remote viewing by calling on Chris Bledsoe now, who you all know is one of the preeminent experiencers of this phenomenon, whose book, UFOs and God, was a bestseller. So Chris, tell us what you think is going on.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Jim. Thank you for having me. So I want to start out by saying that I predicted this. If you read my book, anybody who's read this book realize and watched any podcast that I've done over the last 5-6 years, I've been saying the whole time that these orbs are going to come and wake us up. And I even gave specific times that when that might happen, and that's when you see war between Israel and Iran. I put that in the book. So what Bertie was saying about their alarm, they are really alarmed. The orbs, to me, they're angels to me. They're biblical, just like you said, Jim. They're magical beings. They don't breed like humans. They were created. They listen to our thoughts. I interact with them every day of my life and have literally tens of thousands of bits of data and information from them. And when I interact with them, they're speaking to me. How do you get them to come? Because they listen to me and they send information. So I knew this time was coming. I know a lot about drones because I'm a drone pilot and I'm also a commercial pilot. And I can tell you there's a Remote ID Act that was passed by the federal government that says all toy airplanes, even models, if it's a half a pound or more, it has to have, it's got to be 0.55 pounds, just a little more than a half. You have to have a transponder on them to fly toy airplanes. So none of these are civilians. For one, civilian drones can't see in the dark unless it's got a FLIR camera, and that would usually be the fire departments or whatever. Also, I do know that a friend of mine in New Jersey called me, told me that he filmed the drone, one of these drones, minivan-sized drones, fly over his house. He's shown a laser on it, and in 30 minutes, the FBI knocked on his door and said, "We know you did it, and if you do it again, we'll put you in jail." Yesterday, I was called by someone in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, that there was one of those same drones running a grid over Chapel Hill with a Black Hawk helicopter right behind it with its lights out. So yeah, the military, whatever they're doing, the drones, the orbs are coming on high alert. It's just like the Foo Fighters in World War II, when the fighters were going into Germany, these orbs were beside them. So that's just my opinion that the orbs are on high alert, that whatever the drones are doing, I don't know what they're doing. Maybe they're looking for something, sniffing for nuclear material. That would clearly explain why the orbs are coming in great numbers. And they're not going to stop. They're going to keep coming until everyone understands that we're not alone, and that this confusing it with the drone thing and with something terrestrial, here has got to end. Everybody's going to awaken to a truth between now and 2026, and if not way before, early this year, that we're not alone, and that there's something above us that's concerned for our safety. And it's the same thing with all these people that report seeing these orbs to me, and I have thousands that report to me that never send a MUFON or anywhere. They just reach out to me because they're fans. and it's always the same. They have these experiences after a tragic loss of loved ones, or husband or wife or daughter or child. So there's patterns that exist in this. The drones are muddy in the water, but they will not prevail. The orbs are going to come and awaken this country, this world, and it's happening worldwide. And if you read this book, UFO of God, you'll see exactly that I predicted this years ago, and have been doing it every chance I get, every podcast that I do, to say it's fixing to happen, it's coming. And I know it because they're telling me this, and I can film it and I can share it with other people, 200 at a time. See it when I ask, here it comes. And that's because it's listening to what I'm saying. And it knows our thoughts. So I'm kind of worried about this, what the military's doing, why they're running grids all over the country and worldwide. It doesn't make sense unless they're trying to desensitize the fact that this non-human intelligence is coming into our world, and they're afraid of panic. So if it's not some nuclear material involved, but I believe though they're coming because they're alarmed, like Birdie. So I don't know, we're speculating, all of us, but I was correct. That is happening, and it's going to happen before 2026. And everybody's going to know it. There's no getting around what's coming. And I'm not worried about the orbs at all. I'm worried about the drones and people, not the heavens. So there's so much more I could talk about, but I would just be speculating. But I do know it's coming, and it's coming into our lifetime. And when we're all dead and gone, our children will live a new awakening, a new knowledge. And that's what the book tells you about, this new knowledge that's coming. So thank you for having me, Jim. I wished I could add more here, but without speculating to death, I just can only tell you what I know from inside and my interaction with this.
Well, I want to thank you, Chris, because I don't know of anyone personally that has had more experience with NHI than you on a daily basis, virtually for many, many decades. I'd like to ask just one question before we move on to Rich Hoffman and Steve Bassett for their comment. And that is the sense that you have of imminence. I got this in what Stephen Greer was talking about, that there's a gathering of energy, and that very soon there's going to be an incontrovertibly, globally earth-shaking event that is going to change the human categories of cognition and perception. And you say that it's going to happen between now and 2026. I just want to note that, everyone, because whether it's dozens of indigenous prophecies, whether it's climate scientists that are saying that we're now spinning out of control, the next 12 to 18 to 24 months seems to be one of those moments in history where all the trains are going to come in at once.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a massive transformation one way or another, either break down or break through, or both. And if I understand what you're saying, Chris, that's the essential message that you're conveying in your communications.
Yes, sir. That's the overarching message that I received in 2012. There's a lady figure in my book, and when she came to me in 2012, that's the message she gave it to me. Even the mass incursion of orbs coming into our world to awaken the people, and she told me when, and that was to watch Israel and Iran. If the war, when it starts ramping up, the heavens start getting alarmed, right? So they're coming and they're observing. They're, like Birdie said, They're extremely alarmed at what's going on and where our future is headed. I think they want us to wake up and know a new knowledge and move past where we are and live sustainably on this planet, because I think they watch over everything here and always do.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Deep wisdom there. It's prophetic, actually. We're in a time of prophecy.
Yeah.
In the very real sense of that term. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd like to
Appreciate
now
you.
invite in Richard Hoffman with the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies to give his perspective. Now, Rich, you're from the scientific domain. So how do you, given what we've heard from Danny and Sheehan and Dick Russell and then Bertie Jaworski and Chris Bledsoe, how do you blend what's going on in your mind? What do you think is going on? What do you think is happening?
So thanks for having me on, Jim. Many of you might know that I've been investigating the UFO phenomena since about 1964. And if you know your math, that's 60 years. I got started as an investigator. And so like the cases we mentioned in 1965 and 66, and then also in 1973, I was out investigating all the cases that were being reported in the area. And these are kind of like what we call flaps. One of the interesting characteristics about the flaps that I experienced was that you'd have an initial sighting of an object that would basically, like, you couldn't identify, and it potentially was the unknown in the area. And then the next thing you know is it's all over the media, it's in the papers, and it's talked about on the evening news on every channel. And then you come along with the idea that basically, that we're being invaded. And you had politicians and military all trying to explain what it was going on. So, and they couldn't come up with explanations for it. And when you actually investigated the cases, you'd find out that basically everybody was seeing and reporting things like, the planet Venus. They were reporting aircraft in the area that they weren't spending any time looking up at. They were reporting helicopters and about anything else that moved in the sky. And so similar to that, I look at this as being very much like a drone flap. And I'm also, like Chris mentioned, I'm also a drone pilot. I've also been spending time, because one of the things that investigators do in the UFO phenomena is, I tell them all the time that you have to investigate the IFOs, or the things that are up in the air that people quite often misidentify. And if you look at the history of statistics on every investigations, you find out that generally about like 80%, 70%, something like that, can be identified as misidentifications of natural phenomena or things that are up in the air. And so, with that being said, even if you look at the 140,000 cases in MUFON that was mentioned earlier, you're talking about cases that would be unknowns on the scale of about maybe 42,000. So, I mean, and I think it's even more rare than that, because quite frankly, that, when you do an investigation of any case, you find out that there might be classified missions that you'd never, ever know about. I work in the DoD. I do not see and agree with a lot of the perspectives in terms of us flying military craft over necessarily public areas. When we have test ranges, and we usually test swarms, and we do a whole variety of things with those. I also will point out the fact that drones can be the size of an SUV. They're also built by a lot of different people. In fact, drone technology is on the increase and exceeding many times aircraft that we have up in the air. In terms of the rapid development that's going on, everybody is out building drones. And now you have drones that can last for hours and even days in the air. And what are they doing? They're using everything from, we think of the battery operated ones. We also think of the ones that potentially might have a fuel or a gas fed engine. And yes, there are those that can last for a very long time. But now you're also getting into hybrid kinds of things like you are with cars, where you can actually last even longer. And I can be up in the air for like, many, many hours. And then add into the fact that you now have actually hydrogen fuel cells that are being looked at in terms of development with drone technology around the world globally. So I expected that what was going to happen was that with the fact that we've got about 1 million of these drones that have been sold to the general public, and then you have the public out building their own drones, that you're going to have a plethora of these things happening. And then if you look at the fact that now we're starting to see them at night, it's because the FAA changed the rules to basically allow for night flights. And so you start to see more of an increase in that, where when I fly my drone, initially when we got started, I could only take it up to 400 feet, and I had to do it within 30 minutes of twilight or basically of sunset. And I was able to fly my drone, but I had to bring it down and I couldn't fly it. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that if you look and study drone technologies around the world and what's happening in that world, you find out that a lot of the things that we're talking about are basically big concerns for the military, number one, or even our government to be concerned, because you can have these things last longer. And then you can put payloads on these things to be able to do everything from weaponization all the way down to looking and using LiDAR, radar, you name it. You can put that on a drone. We talked about the remote ID. Many people are balking at using remote ID because they don't want to be discovered. And they know that you can be discovered if you have remote ID added to your drone. And by the way, there's apps out there for you to look at remote ID. For the ones that are on it, you can check out and look at. Let me also add to the fact that many people are referring and they're encouraging their politicians and everybody's telling them, oh, well, use FlightAware, use whatever. Well, FlightAware and Flight Radar 24 have been used in UFO investigations. And there's quite a number of things that doesn't show you that are actual flights in the air. So you'd be very confused about detecting which one of our aircraft. You might look and say that there's nothing here, but there's an aircraft that I'm looking at. So we have a problem with our technology and stuff like that I want to point out, and point out the fact that it's no surprise that a lot of drones, to me, are being misperceived, as well as people now lasing aircraft and helicopters, which is, by the way, against all the rules. A lot of people are not familiar with the FAA rules on drones, and I encourage people to actually go and read and see what it says. And you'd find out that a lot of people are potentially breaking the law by doing what they're doing. But now with 1 million drones, good luck with that and trying to enforce it. I'll also want to clarify that there are a lot of, as we've mentioned before, there are a lot of drones that are going around perimeters of our military bases. And that is a big concern. And so what we've been doing, and I've been engaged in that as well, to help field to military bases drone busters and various drone kinds of detection tools, and to allow for you to basically do like what you saw at Picatinny, was basically deactivate the drone and have it drop out of the sky. And we are actually, using that kind of technology. So it's no surprise that over Picatinny, which by the way happens to be in the Army, and that's who I work for and work with as a contractor, that you would have a drone buster being deployed and being able to knock it out of the sky, because we're going to continue to do that. As far as collecting intelligence, I could take my drone, for example. I could go over here and if I took off the remote ID that I've got on it, and I chose to want to be a bad player or a bad adversary, or let's say that I'm from another country and I want to collect information, I could go put a payload on my drone, go fly it around the perimeter. And if I don't have the remote ID and then people are not seeing it, I can collect all kinds of intel. So potentially you could see that happening around a lot of our military bases because people have an interest in knowing what's going on, as well as foreign adversaries. I will also point out the fact that a lot of people, do I presume that you know what my intent is when we talk about UFOs? The same thing. Do we know what the intent of the UFO is when it's doing whatever it does? And the answer is largely like no. And And oh, by the way, do you know what my intent would be if I'm now attaching certain things and I'm going around the perimeter of the base and I'm actually looking at, using infrared technology or some other kind of technology to be able to gather intelligence. And let's say I feed that back to my foreign source or whatever like that, things I've collected. So it's ludicrous to say that this could not be a foreign adversary. And I don't know how you could possibly even say that. I disagree with a lot of politicians speculating about it because it's basically creating a lot of hysteria, in my view, a lot of panic. And it's now causing an influx of a lot of people seeing anything that moves in the sky as being a potential drone or UFO or anything of that nature. I also think that if we did a proper job of investigating every one of the cases, and I'm hoping that MUFON will do that, you can attempt to come up and eliminate a lot of the plethora of that understanding. But we're living at a point where it's like everything is on the news, including, by the way, fake photos, fake videos, and a whole host of other things that crop up. And just so it's very confusing for the public. I literally can't go into a restaurant without being asked about what I think about the drones, when here I am studying UFOs. And by the way, these are IFOs, and also I don't, aircraft and everything else that's being used. So I just say that we need to calm it down. I think science, let science prevail. We should do the thorough investigations and the research, and help inform leaders who also don't know about UFOs. And you can see it every time when they're talking about it on the news and everything else, that we need to make and educate everybody a lot better. And I hate to say it, but I think drones are going to ever be on the increase because there's such a volume of them, and the development out there is huge. And so that's my view, and I'm sticking with it. And by the way, I do appreciate Richard Dolan in the context of his historical recounting, because I pretty much agree with a lot of his perspectives on this whole thing. I just want to say again, thanks, Jim, for having me on.
Thank you, Richard, very much. I learned a lot about drones in the last few minutes, so thank you. We're going to turn to Steve Bassett for his conversation. Then we're going to invite everybody who's commented so far to come on the screen, because we're going to take a few minutes, maybe 20 minutes or so, to have a general conversation. But let's hear from Steve Bassett first. Steve?
One moment. You need to open my video, please. It's locked up.
There you go.
We on?
Yes.
Okay. Just a second. I want to offer up this narrative, if I may. The United States government knew about the ET presence no later than July of 1947 in Roswell. Made the decision at that time to keep that from the American people. Fine. Almost exactly 5 years later to the week, there was a significant flyover of Washington, D.C. The U.S. government had a problem. General John Sanford made the response for the government, which was equivocative, but not unreasonable. But also there came a response from Donald Keogh, who flat out said, these are extraterrestrials. It's not human. Again, the government made the decision to keep this from the American people. 10 years later, 1962, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we almost had a nuclear war. Only 4 years after that, these craft started appearing over our nuclear facilities and shutting our nuclear weapons down. How many times this happened in the 60s, we don't know, because the Air Force probably at some point was able to keep a much tighter rein on the outcome. But witnesses for a number of these shutdowns came forward. They have been trying to testify before Congress for 30 years, which is when they initially made the decision to start coming forward, led by Captain Robert Salas. The government has not allowed them to testify, and in fact, it has virtually ghosted them. It was about the only thing they could do. All right. And so that was in the 60s. Again, the government kept this from the American people. Decades went on. And then we start to approach what I think is the end game, the end of the truth embargo. and we start moving into that 7-year period starting in 2017. But it's not been easy. It's been slow. There's been pushback. There's been some wins and losses, but we are moving toward disclosure without question. However, we are also moving toward nuclear war. Just that one thing alone is enough to be justification for more action from them. And so as we stall on the disclosure process, we suddenly have what the history will call the era of the drone swarms, the drone swarm flap. Let me take you back to May 17th of 2022. At that time, we had a hearing in front of the subcommittee of the Intelligence Committee in the Senate. Scott Bray and Ronald Moultrie. It was the first hearing, by the way, since the last one in 1968. So we're talking 54 years. So that's progress. And they came in, they were working for the UAP task force, and they testified. It wasn't, grandiose. It was kind of basic. A lot of people were not satisfied. But at that hearing, you may recall, a video was presented, a video that had emerged not too long before the hearing was held. And it involved a drone swarm around one of our ships at night, not over New Jersey, not over the UK, not over some part of the United States, but over one of our ships at night. And they did not shoot them down. In fact, they didn't do anything. And the only reason we got that film is because, well, a lot of sailors have cameras. They're allowed to take cameras with them. And somebody filmed it and it got in our hands. And Scott Bray tried to explain it, but it was really painful. So the drone swarm era goes all the way back to 2022. And it has been escalating ever since. And so here is my conclusion. The extraterrestrials have lost their patience. And the risk to us as a civilization has only increased. And so they decided we're going to end this nonsense. And so they are doing incursions, using their devices, whatever they are, not just in one place, not in two places, not on one continent, multiple continents. And the US government knows it. And what do you do? Here's what they do, right? You can't shoot them down. They know they're extraterrestrial, I can assure you, right? Trying to shoot down extraterrestrial craft of any kind or orbs of any kind, you end up killing human beings, and it's hopeless. You don't want to send up piloted craft because they could crash. So you send up your own drones to somehow monitor them as best you can. And so what you're seeing is a mix of military drones and non-human craft entities of whatever type they want, engaging in some, I guess, process, probably mostly surveillance by us of them. And that is all the government can do. And so what the ETs and their genius have done is put the United States government, the UK government, in an impossible position finally. In other words, we can't tell you what they really are, though we know, but we can't stop them from doing this. And they continue to do it, and they will continue to do it. And the pressure on the government, the embarrassment for the government will become excruciating. And those people within the United States government that somehow have decided that we will never know this truth as long as they walk this face of the earth will finally just capitulate to the growing number of people within our government think it's time we know the truth about this. And so this is an ET-driven intervention to get us into the post-disclosure world before we blow ourselves to hell. The current engagement of it is to send up our own drones to try to, I don't know, follow them, do what we can. The whole thing is a giant fiasco, and it only leads one way, right? There's so many of these things can go on, and so many members of the Senate or the House or the DOD that have to come out with ridiculously idiotic answers and make complete fools of themselves before they realize if we would end this truth embargo, we could stop making fools of ourselves and our government and move on with civilization. That's the narrative that I'm using for this. I'm very comfortable with it, but I certainly invite those that disagree. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That was very insightful conflation, I would say, bringing together of all the various strands that we've heard so far.
Oh, I
Stay
forgot something, Jim.
vigilant.
I forgot something, please. I forgot to mention that I'm aware that another hearing is in the works, and the nuclear weapons tampering or shutdown witnesses led by Robert Salas are in the forefront of testifying at those hearings. Finally, 34 years after Bob first came forward. And I'm sorry I didn't mention that, but this is a big deal. If those witnesses, and there's anywhere from 4 to 9, some have died off, get in front of a hearing and testify to the shutdown of these missiles, that's ball game. And so that's something we can look forward to. It could happen before the inauguration, but will certainly happen after the inauguration. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. I'd like to have everyone who's still with us to open up their videos so we can have a conversation, because this has been a very rich mix, everybody. We've heard the whole panoply of possibilities. So Richard Dolan, I want to start with you. How do you, as a historian, bring this conversation together, and has what you've heard changed your view at all of what you think is happening?
It's been a great conversation. I'm really honored to be part of this, and grateful for everyone who contributed, because I think everyone's had a very interesting perspective that's added to this, honestly. I mean, I guess when I think about this current wave of mystery drones, the question really I'm always instinctively asking, is it ours or theirs? And I think a lot of us are thinking it's both. It's probably true. It's probably both. You know, and I said earlier that I'm not aware of a single significant flap that has been conclusively shown to be U.S. tech. There are a couple of outlier possible cases that you might disagree. That 40 years ago, almost as we speak, was the Great Hudson Valley UFO flap in the early 1980s. There were always suspicions, and there still are suspicions, that that was done by, at least to some extent, secret testing of some kind of technology. Although, in fairness, very little concrete evidence has ever been brought forth to support that, even now, all these years later. I still think it's mostly explained by non-human tech. It's my own opinion. And it's not impossible. You know, Danny and who else? Who else was saying? Dick Russell, yeah. That a strong opinion that it could be some kind of U.S. testing. I mean, it's possible, but I would just say, in the context of UFO flaps, this would be, as far as I see, a departure from past actions. Because I really am not, it's very easy for all kinds of people to say, oh yeah, this is some kind of testing. You hear this all the time. And we've heard this for 80 years, actually, 80 years. Back when Kenneth Arnold saw his flying saucers, he thought, is this some kind of weapons test, some kind of missile? It's constantly, but the fact is, when you look for the evidence, you don't find it. You really don't find it. Not anything that's gives you confidence. So I would hesitate to say that this is all some kind of tech. Not saying it's impossible, but we've got to look for every bit as much confirmable evidence for that as for anything else. And it's just very easy for commentators from all over the place to say, yeah, we're testing drones. You know, so I don't know. I mean, Rich Hoffman made a absolutely spot on point, which is that there's so much confusion. There's so much, like with every single UFO flap, or even sightings, when you go through them, there's so many misidentifications that, and you just have to accept that. That's part of the price you have to pay to investigate the real cases. So it's confusing. And in terms of, it's probably different from MUFON, where they're getting specific cases. But as I said earlier, and this is the last thing I'll say, there are very few that when I'm going through these cases, start to finish, that is, What time did it start? What was the date? What was the exact location? What was the appearance and behavior of the object? How did the object depart? When did the sighting end, in other words? Like, of all of the supposedly more than 5,000 cases that the federal groups say that they've looked into, I don't know of a single one where I've been able to find out this particular one started here at this location, did this, it looked like that, and this is how it ended. And without that data, I just ask, like, how the heck am I supposed to, or anyone, do a proper analysis of what is going on? It makes it impossible. So what it looks like, there's something very significant going on. It's obviously out of smoke. There's probably some fire, but what are the specifics? And we really better catch up to figure this out if we want to come to some conclusions. But never rule out, don't rule out non-human intelligence. I'm just saying, do not rule that out, because that is, in my opinion, that's real. That's a significant thing. And most of the mainstream people, they're oblivious to it, or they don't believe it. And so they're likely to go into, it's a psyop, it's a false flag. Because a lot of those people, I'm not saying the folks here, but a lot of those people don't believe in ET being here. And so they're going to go into the whole UFO thing as a false flag, which I think is very mistaken.
Yeah, gotcha. Thank you. So I want to swing over to Danny and Dick here for their comment. And I'd like to focus your remarks briefly on just the following single point. Would you, in your interpretive framework, allow for NHI? I understand that you're making the assertion of U.S. government activity, but do you think it's exclusively U.S. government, or would you, as you view the information through your sources, would you have room for the NHI hypothesis, as Richard and I think Bertie and others are asserting? Starting with you, Danny, and then you, Dick.
Surely I do. Yeah, I believe that some percentage of these sightings, when you filter out, the mistaken airplanes and Venus and other things that get folded into here, I believe that some of these that have actually been videoed have all of the characteristics of the spheres and the orbs, this peculiar phenomenon of these large spherical objects with a box inside with technical equipment and stuff in them, which I personally believe many of which are some sort of a surveillance mechanism that the UFO craft project out, that have qualities of consciousness in them, just like the craft do, that I believe. So I very clearly believe that that this, whatever the military readiness exercise may be that is going on, out of Fort Dix and these other places, testing these, that they're actually very specific. It's the HPG-3 nuclear detector drones that they're testing, is all connected to the threat of nuclear materials inside the United States, which are in turn a function of the major global situations going on, with the United States, engaged in supporting this massive slaughter going on in the Middle East, in the massive slaughter going on both sides in the Ukraine, that the United States is vulnerable to having some people react to this by taking direct action against us. And that I think the United States military has to have this type of technology, from their own perspective, to try to test, to determine whether or not there's a loose nuke floating around inside the United States. A readiness exercise like this would very definitely generate the exact kind of response that Bertie is talking about, and Richard, I think, has noted, and I think, Chris, you too recognize that the UFO beings are extraordinarily concerned about the nature of what's happening on our planet right now. And so they're definitely going to deploy to start monitoring what it is that's going on. So I believe very specifically that there is a very real mix into what is happening right now of the non-human intelligence surveillance operation that's been going on for some time, and it's reaching this major kind of crescendo that's going on. I don't believe that this is a false flag operation. I don't agree with Stephen Greer's most recent interpretation that he's had for some time, but you certainly can't put that past the national security state. I mean, let's be clear about that. I've often said that to Stephen. You know, it's not that this is beyond what the national security state would be willing to do, this legacy group, but I believe that what we're getting is a mix of these things right now. I believe that the most logical, at least tentative explanation for what's going on is that there is this military readiness exercise that is on a grand scale testing this equipment, and that you're getting a response from the UFO beings monitoring this stuff. So there's a mix of what's going on here, in my opinion. So the answer, yes, I very much assume that this is a part of what's happening here.
Now, Dick Russell, what would be your comment, having heard this discussion? What do you think is, in your own personal opinion, what do you think is going on?
Yeah, it was a fascinating discussion, and I'm on the same page as Danny. I think it is very likely to be a mix, and I hope that if these benevolent UAPs are observing what's going on. You know, I thought Birdie, the remote viewer, what she said about how they're talking about a broken connection to our planet is so true of our world today, and it has to do with all these different elements that we've talked about: climate change and possibility of nuclear war. I mean, we're at a real huge turning point, precipice in 2025 as it approaches. And so I would say that it's very likely that that this is indeed a military exercise, and that there is a rogue group that may be planning nefarious acts that's being watched. And that would be true from both sides, from both the extraterrestrial craft, if they're with us, and I hope they are, or the military itself. So it's an amazing situation that we're in, and I'm much looking forward to the likelihood that documents are going to be released very soon that are going to back up the fact that we've been visited by so-called NHIs, non-human intelligence, for a long time. And we've got our worldview is going to change dramatically, of course, if that happens, and I'm much looking forward to it.
Good, thank you. I want to now turn to the scientists on the panel, Robert Spearing and Richard Hoffman. MUFON and SCU, by the very nature of their mission, are looking at more specificities of hardware and measurability. But just personally, I mean, Robert, you're the director of international investigations for MUFON. Does the consensus that seems to be emerging among many of the panel that this is a combination of human and NHI interactivity in one way or another, does that make sense to you? And then Richard Hoffman, does that make sense to you? Oh, you should unmute. There we go.
There we go. First, I'd like to say that Richard Hoffman was one of my mentors when I first got into MUFON, and it's really a pleasure to see him again. He mentioned something about drone technology. Due to the Ukrainian war, drone technology is at least 15 years ahead of where it should be right now from all the innovation going on there. But yeah, I do believe that there may be a mix of ordinary and anomalous going on. And I always go back to last year, February 2023, when the Chinese balloon was shot down. The Chinese wanted their balloon back. And then a week later, we shot down 3 other objects, one over Alaska, one over the Yukon, and one over Lake Huron. Those stories were squashed. After 5 days, the search was called off. They said the conditions were too rough. They'll never be able to find it. The object over Lake Huron went down in approximately 147 feet of water. Later that year, they found that Titan submersible in 12,000 feet of water in 3 days in a search field the size of Massachusetts. So for them to tell you they couldn't find something that went down in 147 feet of water is a lie. What was it that they shot down 3 times the week after the Chinese balloon was shot down? And nobody ever asked for those objects back. So I think that there is a combination of anomalous and ordinary military, and it's combined in some odd fashion. But I think we're on the right track.
Gotcha. Richard Hoffman, what's your view? Personally, just personally.
I love the discussion. Bob, it's nice to see you again, spearing. By all means, I recognize you, and I appreciate all you do, and MUFON does. I'm a lifetime member, or still a benefactor of MUFON, and I was engaged heavily. My point here is that I really think that we have to get our arms around what is the known that's up in the air that's confusing all of us. And I'm saying that, and also looking at human interactions or human behavior. We've seen in the past from UFO cases where, again, people will go out and they misidentify. I literally was escorted by a police cruiser out to a scene where 30 people were up looking at the planet Venus and calling it a UFO. And so I've seen that level of misinterpretation going on. And I think that that's part of it. I also want to say that, echoing what Robert had just mentioned in terms of that technology again, with drones, everybody thinks that the qualifying factor of that this is a drone. We typically say it's a drone because it's got the navigation lights, or we can hear the engine noise. Well, they're getting better with drone technology to be able to muffle the sound. So now we have drones that you're not going to be able to detect by hearing, and especially on the military side, where we're actually developing all different kinds of drones. We don't want to be stealth, and we want them to not be detected. And we can, make it appear so that it's not going to show up as a heat source, like somebody had mentioned, that I'm going to see it with my police radar. So I can do all those things to basically spoof that whole thing. And I think that we have to be very much aware, again, that there's a large presence of drones that now people can go and fly. And they're doing it. And plus, they're all developing their own unique drones of various sizes and capabilities, and adding in their own different payloads to do different things. And I just think that that's drone reality that we have to accommodate to, and figure out that this is going to be in our world, and to figure out how we're going to deal with that. And so I'll also point out the fact that, it's other states, and this is what we've seen in patterns of UFO flaps, is that might happen in one area, and then it gets on the news. The next thing you know is it's happening around the world. And people are seeing those things and reporting them because they're seeing them too, right? And they don't know what they are. So again, I think that we need to really get smarter. We need to keep educating the public on this new reality where we're going to start to see all these drones up there, and they're going to change, they're going to look different. And this is an opportunity for us. Plus, I also think that the legislation and everything else around them and the tools need to be better, and we need to have enforcement to be able to separate that. Because I want to get rid of the noise and get to the UFO, which is the signal, and if I can eliminate all this ash and trash stuff that's out there that's being misidentified, I'm going to learn more about the UFO. And that's what I'm hoping that we can do.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. I want to turn to you now, Steve Bassett, and then Kevin Wright for your comments, because I think, beginning with you, Stephen, you're very clear that there's not only a both and going on, and in that sense, really agreeing with Bertie and Chris and others, but that it's actually causative. That the escalating dangers that Danny was talking about geostrategically, and now specifically around the nuclear weapons proximity, is causing them to show up. I'd like to have you just deepen your sense of that, because that takes the interactivity to a very profound level. And I know, Chris, you're speaking to that point as well, because if that's true, then the fact that it's all happening means that A causes B, means that we humans need to understand that and take action to eliminate B or eliminate A so that we can get on with the relationship with B, right? Steve Bassett, a comment, please. You have to need to unmute.
One thing that's not mentioned here, because it's sort of off to the side. As we move forward toward disclosure, we have to kind of keep this off to the side. Right, wrong, don't know, but that's the way it is, and that's contact. And the fact is that over these last 70 years, we've had repeated reports from contactees in writing. Hundreds of thousands have been sent to various researchers, which are filled with examples of which they're given messages in various ways from the ETs about the fact that we're headed towards some very untoward outcome here. Messages in their minds and so forth that stick with them the rest of their life. But then there's the school incursions, when they land near schools and they put these messages in the minds of children. That's part of the evidentiary matrix, but doesn't get talked about much. So it's the idea that they have a concern about where things are going, I think, is well established. And then there's the issue of this. We could have disclosed them. We could have disclosed this 74 years ago. They couldn't stop that, and we didn't. And so what I'm suggesting is this. Their patience is finally up. All right. They've gone along with this. They've given us plenty of opportunity. We've chosen not to. Not just the United States, but all the other countries. And by the way, these incursions are now occurring in other countries. And if they're occurring in China or Russia, I can assure you they're not going to talk about it. So God knows how many, quote, ET vehicles of some kind, orbs, plasmas, whatever, are flying over wherever, right? I think their patience is up. And so the way they've decided to do this is we're just going to fly over places and keep doing it and keep doing it. Not like 52, but over and over again until finally the people that run these countries just give up this truth embargo. All right. And what they're choosing to do is respond by sending up our own drones. At least we can send drones up there, kind of fly around, see what's going on. And we're seeing those, and we're seeing the ET. It's very confusing. But here's one thing we do know. They cannot shoot them down. They almost certainly know they're there. And we know that they're here. And so the big questions really are not what, but why. And disclosure is all about getting to the why. Why are they here? Why do they engage us? Why do they contact humans? Why do they abduct humans? Right? Why do they put crop circles down? Why have we maintained the truth embargo? All the whys are buried behind that embargo. And those are the things that are upsetting us. Those are the things that are putting us at risk of doing something really stupid. The truth embargo is now the biggest liability on this planet. Ending it is the most important thing we have to do. And those nuclear witness shutdown men, those strategic air command officers, have wanted to testify for 30 years. And the United States Air Force knows that that cannot happen, because when they testify, it is game over. And I can tell you as a fact that every single member of the Intelligence Committee of the Senate and the House Subcommittee of the Oversight Committee has got their affidavits in their offices. And one meeting has been held, another's in the works. They want another meeting, and those witnesses are going to sit down and take an oath and say, these craft have turned off our nuclear weapons a number of times. And then I want to see what the spokesperson for the White House and the Department of Defense has to say about that.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Chris Bledsoe, that obviously is something that you feel strongly about. I just wonder if you can make a brief comment to underscore what Steve said or share a different perspective.
Well, yes, I am honored to speak behind Steve. I think that was a great, what I just heard from him was absolutely beautiful. It ought to go down in history. I mean, that was that clip should be played over and over. It was very powerful, Steve. I do want to say to everyone in this group that for the last 15 years, I've been 18 years, really, 18 years this January, but for 15 years, I've been documenting this phenomenon. And I have maintained for 15 years, when I reported to MUFON way back, that these orbs can mimic anything. They mimic airplanes. I have witnessed it myself. One on the ground in front of me shift from a football to a helicopter in front of me, 150 yards away, and then fly off over my head. And I have witnessed it. I filmed it. I have metal balls. These things turn into metal balls or what looks like raindrops that glow. So a lot of the drones that we may think are drones could be orbs, in fact, mimicking the drones. So there's a lot happening there. I just had to add that in there about this drone thing, because there's videos going around of watching orbs turn into an airplane, what looks like one. But I agree with Steve. I think whoever's up there has a big stake in what's going on down here. Maybe the threat of nuclear war. I do know it's got their attention. It had their attention in World War II. They've shown us that they can turn off our nuclear sites. They can do it, and they monitor our thoughts. They know what you're thinking. And I would, many people come here and see this. Just speak to the sky, and all of a sudden they start showing up and flashing and flying by. It's because they can hear us, and they know what we're thinking. And I'll end it with this: that I do know that they're alarmed at the situation in this world. But I think the good will come. It'll all even out, and we'll get past it with a new knowledge, and there'll be a reset in the way we move forward in our thinking in this world and in our education system. It's got to change. We've been so long saying that we're alone and thinking that. We've got to get out of that. We've got to move forward. We're going to have to realize that there's a higher power above us. However it's laid out, it's there. They've been writing about it for thousands of years. It's the same thing the biblical stories we're talking about. What does that mean? We really don't know. But I can tell you it's there, and I can share it with people, as many as 200 at the time, and do it every time. And so, like Rich, if you want to come see it, you come to my house and we'll share it with you. And and that would be a big thing in helping you understand more about this. I think once you see it and you see it react to you, it changes your whole thought process, and it changes everything and the way you perceive things. And I see it happening all the time. But I hope I didn't take too much time there.
Oh, no, that was very good, Chris. Thank you. These final comments are very moving. This is a major world issue, and we have to approach it with deep humility, because we really, in the end, don't know what we don't know. I want to get quick comments from Kevin Wright and then George Balk, and then we'll wrap the session. Kevin?
Thanks, Jim. In my opinion, when we look at this issue, as a single issue, the explanation of drones, misidentified planes and things, can certainly make a lot of sense. But if you listen to people like Richard Dolan and others, you have to put into, historical perspective, and it makes it much more difficult to buy that as a hypothesis of, something simple and prosaic like that. Because, a year and 2 days ago was the beginning of the so-called drone incursion over Langley Air Force Base. A month ago, we had the one in, parts of the United Kingdom. And there's a lot of historical record involved that suggests that there's been many similar such incidences. long before the advent of so-called drones. So I think that we have to put those things into perspective here. And I think that when you listen to people like Chris Bledsoe, and I think Bertie mentioned it before, and I've certainly written about it, is this concept of the mimicry that might be going on. You know, many people have discussed this before that have studied the phenomena in great detail, and that would include Dr. Eric Davis, Dr. Colm Kelleher, and others who have described bidirectional mimicry of, you know, the phenomena mimicking our technology, and then, you know, the United States government sort of trying to mimic the technologies or the activities of the phenomenon. So what makes most sense to me is that, you know, that there is a phenomenon occurring, and, you know, the response to that is to mask it and flood the zone with drones and other things to, you know, to throw people off the scent of exactly what's going on, to confuse the situation and make people think that there's, you know, lots of drones going on, but there's actually nothing to see there. But I think what's also being lost in this discussion is the fact that, you know, we have an executive branch, the Department of Defense, an intelligence community that is telling us that, you know, that they know certain things, that it's not a foreign adversary and it's not ours. But they also tell us that they don't know what they are, where they're coming from, or where they're going. None of these things add up. So, you know, we're left to do our own investigation with this because the government has not been forthcoming or transparent in any way, shape, or form. That's what I think.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And being there in Washington, D.C., where mass confusion reigns supreme, your clarity is very welcome, Mr. Wright.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Georg Bach in Berlin. Georg, do you have any final comment?
I think we haven't heard from Bertie yet, isn't it right, Jim? Let's give it over to Bertie first.
Well, you'll go ahead and we'll give Bertie the final
Okay,
word.
that's great. Well, I'm really astonished by the diversity of perspectives that we got on this panel. I think it's a really important conversation to have, you know, that we, in the spirit of what Ubiquity stands for from an integral theory perspective, but also what MPI embodies, you know, with a spectrum of different perspectives on reality. And we really tried to get this expressed today, so that we have, you know, subjective truths, we have exterior truths, and they all have to come together. And so it's really hard to get a final opinion on this. My gut feeling is there is a mixture of NHI activity and something else brewing that has to do with the deep state. And these last days, I really had difficulty sleeping. I was extremely energetically in a state of upheaval. And it's really weird because I'm not in the US and I'm not in New Jersey, but it felt as if I were somehow. And maybe I was too long on X, but maybe there's also some qualitatively different thing about what is happening right now. And that's how it feels to me. And it feels like many people in the mainstream are now in the position that we in this UAP subculture have been for many, many years, where there is this politics of cognitive dissonance has just reached a point where it's unsustainable. Like something in the human spirit is about to break, you know?
Thank you. Thank you. It's a sober moment, no doubt about it. It's a sober moment where we're about ready to go pop. I think everybody everywhere feels that building up inside their psyche. So thank you for that, Georg. And then Bertie, a little final word from Bertie.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed this discussion and was intrigued by everyone's perspective. And the truth may be some combination of all of these things. I know from my remote viewing sessions that I did on this ongoing phenomenon that whatever is happening with the military, it's much smaller than the NHI presence. There was so many more NHI type craft in my sessions than there were military. So that seems to be a much larger thing going on. And it may be that they are completely taking over what's happening, what's going on with the military. definitely got the sense that they are extraordinarily concerned about where we are as humanity, but not just humanity, where we are in relationship to our own planet and our own solar system. It seems to be that we have this deep connection with absolutely everything around us. That's what makes it possible to remote view, after all. And they want to stop or at least warn what's going on right now with our military or with different things in the world. I think that most of what people have been seeing and experiencing, aside from misidentification situations, really is non-human intelligence mimicking craft or orb-like craft, plasma type craft. And I look forward to what happens next. I think we're on a grand adventure, and I think that life on planet Earth is going to change in the near future.
Thank you, Bertie. Thank you all. This has been an extraordinarily rich and textured discussion, and I'm deeply grateful. And I feel as if we've all shared deeply and we've learned a lot. I would like to make one closing comment, which for me enables me to hold the complexity in which we find ourselves, but also points the way forward. And that is that I would add the notion to everything that's been said, that I believe that for me, we're in a moment of history that can only be called numinous. We are experiencing what Rudolf Otto calls the holy. And I want to make the following observation about the numinous and the holy. The holy is not Moses alone or the burning bush. Taken separately, there's no holiness. What makes an event holy in the spiritual traditions is when the finite and the infinite, the human and the divine, make contact. It was Moses falling on his knees before the burning bush that catalyzed the experience of the holy. We're in one of those moments, in my view. We're in a moment pregnant with meaning. We're in a moment in which simultaneously humanity is in the act of destroying itself, and the heavens and the earth are intervening with increasingly dramatic interventions to empower us to save ourselves. We're in one of those moments where, after government repression of the most important information in the history of our species, that we're not alone, the dam is breaking slowly, painfully, with many obstructions, but the people of the world are now beginning to come into a collective awareness that history is changing and human identity is being metamorphosized through cosmic contact. And it's our appreciation, I think, to understand the holiness of this moment that allows us to hold the drones and the ETs simultaneously in a recognition that they're interacting, and that's what makes it holy in our time. So thank you, everyone, for your participation in this. We will hold others as the new year unfolds and events continue to shatter our assumptions and compel deeper understandings. This is what Humanity Rising is all about. And in closing, we want to show a video prepared by the New Paradigm Institute, because the whole point of these exercises is to get public engagement. That's what it's going to take to break the hold of our governments, of the secrecy that they've bound us in for all these many decades. It's ultimately the people coming together in a vast global coalition and movement, demanding disclosure, and equally fundamentally reaching out to the NHI for meaningful contact that's going to transform and save the world as we know it. So thank you, everyone. This will bring our session to a close. You can join the after chat if you would like. The link is in the chat box. And now we'll just play the New Paradigm Institute video. I bid you a happy holiday and a wonderful new year. And we'll see you on the other side. We've ended the year with much to ponder and much to consider. Thank you, everyone.
In December, we saw a large number of drone incidents at Langley.
They're like blinking lights. They're like changing colors.
We still don't know who was behind those. We see consistent incursions around sensitive government facilities.
You're telling me we don't know what the hell these drones are in New Jersey are? Is that correct?
That's right.
It's crazy.
Reports of drone incursions are increasing at civilian airports and military bases across the U.S. and worldwide.
Mysterious, apparently small car-sized drones that people are spotting flying over New Jersey in the middle of the night.
And in the 30 minutes we've been here, we've seen up to 7 drones in the sky above us. They're above us right now, just moving back and forth.
This has been happening every single night with the exception of Thanksgiving over the past few weeks.
Oh my God, here we go. Here it is.
Yo, look, looks like a triangle. Look.
It just made a perfect triangle. It made a triangle.
Whether these drones belong to foreign powers like Russia or China, unknown entities, or something entirely different, the lack of transparency is troubling. The American people deserve answers. Who is behind these incursions? Why can't our military respond? And what's really going on?
The American people deserve to know the truth on this, and we also deserve to have actions on it. The answer can't be we don't know, and the answer can't be zero.